Amazingly, our two different tracks led us to the same conclusion. A low-fat, plant-based whole food lifestyle is the most effective way to gain insulin sensitivity using your food as medicine. Carbohydrate-rich whole foods require large amounts of insulin if and only if the total amount of fat in your diet is also high. Regardless of your understanding of diabetes physiology, we encourage you to keep an open mind when reading these next chapters. Some of these concepts might be difficult for you to wrap your head around at first, and you might even feel overwhelmed by the information in this book because it directly conflicts with what you have been taught in the past. And if that's the case, you'll feel exactly how we felt when we first learned it. Don't worry, the information in this chapter may seem counterintuitive, but rest assured that it's biologically accurate. Today I'm presenting to you my highlights of a book that delves deeply into the phenomenon of diabetes, and it is called Mastering Diabetes, the revolutionary method to reverse insulin resistance permanently in type 1, type 1.5, type 2, prediabetes, and gestational diabetes, written by Cyrus Kambala and Robbie Barbaro. Fats from the foods we eat accumulate inside muscle and liver cells. As these fats build up, they interfere with insulin function, causing a condition called insulin resistance and setting the stage for type 2 diabetes. A low-fat, plant-based diet, of course, has no animal fat and very little vegetable fat, so it helps that build-up fat to dissipate, allowing insulin function to be restored to a great degree. Many people have put this approach to work for type 1 diabetes too, finding that it greatly improves their glucose control, slashes their insulin requirements, and helps them feel better overall. Researchers are also investigating ways of preventing type 1 diabetes, finding that breastfeeding, especially avoiding exposure to cow's milk proteins, may reduce the chances of sparking the autoimmune reaction that destroys the insulin-producing beta cells of the pancreas. This book can save your life. Diabetes is currently one of the fastest growing chronic diseases in the United States and around the world. By 2050, experts estimate that diagnosed diabetes will affect 33% of the US population. That's 1 in every 3 people. If you're living with prediabetes or non-insulin dependent type 2 diabetes, we'll teach you how to completely reverse both conditions using your food as medicine. For those living with insulin-dependent diabetes, including type 1 diabetes, type 1.5 diabetes, or insulin-dependent type 2 diabetes, we'll teach you how to maximize your insulin sensitivity and make your blood glucose significantly easier to control, while reducing your overall need for basal and bolus insulin. Because this information is so effective, you must implement these changes with the help, support, knowledge, and guidance of your physician. Many people living with diabetes around the world have found that the Mastering Diabetes method results in a strong reduction in the requirement for oral medication, insulin, or both. Failure to reduce your medications appropriately may result in life-threatening hypoglycemia and even death. Most people living with prediabetes and type 2 diabetes have been able to completely reverse diabetes, discontinue the use of oral medications and insulin, and drop their A1C to 5.6% or lower. Those living with insulin-dependent diabetes often experience a 10 to 60% reduction in both basal and bolus insulin use, with more stable and predictable blood glucose values, and an A1C value between 5.5 and 6.5%. Amazingly, our two different tracks led us to the same conclusion. A low-fat, plant-based whole food lifestyle is the most effective way to gain insulin sensitivity using your food as medicine. Carbohydrate-rich whole foods require large amounts of insulin if and only if the total amount of fat in your diet is also high. Over time, we have fine-tuned the Mastering Diabetes method into something that is truly unique. It encompasses the following 4 components. Component 1. Low-fat, plant-based whole food nutrition. We encourage carbohydrate-rich whole foods, including fruits, starchy vegetables, legumes, and intact whole grains. Component 2. Intermittent fasting. Not eating is one of the most powerful ways to improve your insulin sensitivity. improve your cardiovascular health, lose weight, and actually increase your lifespan. Component 3. Daily movement. Your body is designed for physical activity, and when you make daily movement a part of your lifestyle, you're likely to dramatically improve your insulin sensitivity, your energy levels, and your mood. Component 4. Decision trees. We have created a specific tool that helps you address hour-by-hour decisions, look for patterns, and establish cause and effect relationships between your lifestyle choices and your blood glucose profile. Insulin resistance is a major condition that underlies many chronic metabolic diseases, including, but not limited to, type 1 diabetes, type 1.5 diabetes, type 2 diabetes, prediabetes, gestational diabetes, coronary artery disease, atherosclerosis, cancer, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, obesity, polycystic ovary syndrome, PCOS, peripheral neuropathy, retinopathy, Alzheimer's disease, chronic kidney disease, and fatty liver disease. Achieving tight blood glucose control without reversing insulin resistance is not enough to minimize your risk for future diabetes complications. The good news is that insulin resistance is often detectable up to 20 years before the symptoms of diabetes and heart disease become noticeable, which means that controlling and reversing insulin resistance today can prevent the onset of many chronic metabolic diseases in the future. Type 1 diabetes is commonly referred to as juvenile onset diabetes because it has traditionally affected young children and adolescents. It is an autoimmune condition that can completely destroy insulin-producing beta cells in your pancreas, dramatically decreasing endogenous, self-made insulin production, while increasing the need for exogenous insulin, insulin injected through a syringe, pen, or insulin pump. Type 1.5 diabetes, or latent autoimmune diabetes in adults, LADA, is also an autoimmune version of diabetes that destroys insulin-producing beta cells. Unlike type 1 diabetes, however, type 1.5 diabetes affects people over the age of 30 and is a slower progressing autoimmune reaction that gradually destroys beta cells and decreases endogenous insulin production, often over the course of 5 to 10 years. Think of type 1.5 diabetes as an adult-onset, slow-progressing version of type 1 diabetes that is often misdiagnosed as type 2 diabetes. Prediabetes is a condition that precedes type 2 diabetes and is diagnosed when your fasting blood glucose is between 100 and 125 milligrams per deciliter, or when your A1C value is between 5.7 and 6.4%. Prediabetes occurs when your muscles and liver have become resistant to the effects of insulin, resulting in a minor traffic jam of both glucose and insulin in your blood that slightly elevates your fasting blood glucose. Think of prediabetes as a warning sign that type 2 diabetes is fast approaching. Type 2 diabetes, non-insulin dependent, occurs when your fasting blood glucose increases beyond 125 milligrams per deciliter or when your A1C level is 6.5% or greater, yet you are still producing sufficient quantities of endogenous insulin. A type 2 diabetes diagnosis follows when prediabetes progresses beyond mild insulin resistance, often resulting in an increased risk for high blood pressure, high cholesterol, atherosclerosis, weight gain, fatty liver disease, chronic kidney disease, and low energy. Type 2 diabetes, insulin dependent, occurs when your fasting blood glucose increases beyond 125 milligrams per deciliter or when your A1C level is 6.5% or greater, and you are not producing sufficient quantities of endogenous insulin. Insulin-dependent type 2 diabetes occurs when beta cells have overproduced insulin for a long period of time, resulting in an inability to produce sufficient insulin. Gestational diabetes is a version of diabetes that affects pregnant women and usually disappears after giving birth. Gestational diabetes can occur at any stage of pregnancy, but it is more common in the second half, when a woman fails a diagnostic screening known as the glucose tolerance test. Even though gestational diabetes often disappears after birth, it's still important to address it during pregnancy because it can increase the risk for premature birth, preeclampsia, high blood pressure, and stillbirth, and can dramatically increase the risk for developing type 2 diabetes in the months and years after pregnancy. Your diabetes health is only as good as your daily habits. If you have taken the time to create strong, effective, and reliable habits that improve your blood glucose control and metabolic health, then you're likely to reap the rewards of this lifestyle for a long time. If instead you speed through making lifestyle changes and don't take the time to create a collection of long-lasting habits, then you're likely to revert back to your old habits when confronted with challenging situations. The Mastering Diabetes approach. To make the Mastering Diabetes method as simple as possible to follow, we've categorized foods as green light foods, fruits, starchy vegetables, legumes, intact whole grains, non-starchy vegetables, leafy greens, herbs, and spices, yellow light foods, fatty plants like avocados, olives, coconuts, nuts including peanuts, seeds, edamame, and pasta alternatives, and red light foods, red meat, white meat, fish, dairy products, eggs, refined grains and processed foods, vegetable oils, and refined sugars. Green light foods are those that actually improve your insulin sensitivity and can be enjoyed in abundance. Yellow light foods are okay to include in your diet occasionally, that is, they are not to be eaten in unlimited quantities, and red light foods are those that actually create insulin resistance and should be minimized or completely avoided for best results. The most common complaint about eating a low-fat, plant-based whole food diet, and the reason why most people abandon plant-based diets in general, is not understanding how to eat enough calories. People often report that they have low energy or are losing weight too rapidly. Intermittent fasting is one of the most effective ways to liberate stored fat, including fat that is tucked away in your muscles and liver that inhibits the action of insulin. Over 85 years of research has documented amazing benefits of both calorie restriction and intermittent fasting for preventing and delaying the onset of heart disease, diabetes, hypertension, and cancer, and reducing important biomarkers like blood pressure, LDL cholesterol, the bad cholesterol, and triglycerides. Performing a minimum of 3 hours of exercise per week divided into 5 or 6 sessions spread over a 7-day period will keep your insulin sensitivity high at all times. This approach is much more effective than spending longer periods of time exercising a few days a week, which temporarily boosts your insulin sensitivity for only a few days at a time, while you become less insulin sensitive on your rest days. Diabetes is not a villain, nor is it even a separate entity from you. Diabetes is you, and you are diabetes. Embracing this demon as a part of you is one of the most powerful early steps you can take in managing your relationship together. When you embrace diabetes as a part of your physical, emotional, and spiritual being, you'll feel empowered and at peace, and you'll maximize your chances of taking full control of your health. What really causes insulin resistance? Regardless of your understanding of diabetes physiology, we encourage you to keep an open mind when reading these next chapters. Some of these concepts might be difficult for you to wrap your head around at first, and you might even feel overwhelmed by the information in this book because it directly conflicts with what you have been taught in the past. And if that's the case, you'll feel exactly how we felt when we first learned it. Don't worry, the information in this chapter may seem counterintuitive, but rest assured that it's biologically accurate. In the same way that a carpenter selects the right tool for the job, a doctor selects the right tool for a given medical condition. The problem is that the main tools that doctors are trained to use are pharmaceutical medications, not food. The result is that doctors treat diabetes and its complications using medications rather than evidence-based nutrition. It's not your doctor's fault. Medical schools barely scratch the surface when it comes to providing nutrition-related education. Physicians are not trained on the power and efficacy of a low-fat diet in reversing insulin resistance and improving insulin sensitivity, and are just as susceptible to fat diets and catchy marketing as is the general public. The carbohydrate-centric diabetes model states that when you eat any foods containing a sufficient quantity of carbohydrate energy, regardless of whether they are processed or whole foods, the carbohydrate energy turns into quote-unquote sugar. In turn, these sugar molecules rapidly increase your blood glucose, which then triggers your pancreas to secrete large amounts of insulin. As a result of large surges of insulin in your blood, tissues downregulate their insulin receptors, which creates a state of insulin resistance in which sugar can't get out of your blood. In addition, since insulin is your fat storage hormone, large insulin spikes increase the amount of fat you store. Your liver then converts large amounts of sugar to fat, and this causes you to gain weight, which in turn makes you more insulin resistant. According to this model, the solution to diabetes is to eat foods that minimize or eliminate your need for insulin, which includes foods that are low in carbohydrate energy, high in fat, and high in protein. The reason why millions of people around the world believe that the carbohydrate-centric diabetes model is correct is because carbohydrate-rich foods will spike your blood glucose if, and only if, your baseline level of insulin resistance is high to begin with. Treating the symptom of insulin resistance, high blood glucose and excess insulin, rather than treating the cause, a high-fat diet causing insulin resistance, works in the short term but fails to minimize your risk for many chronic diseases and worsening diabetes health in the long term. By increasing your insulin sensitivity, you will be able to eat carbohydrate-rich foods and experience excellent blood glucose control, while simultaneously decreasing your risk for weight gain, obesity, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, and coronary artery disease. Scientists, medical professionals, and people with diabetes erroneously use the word sugar when referring to both added sweeteners and processed foods, as well as the natural energy contained in whole foods like fruits and starchy vegetables, reinforcing the concept that anything that creates more quote-unquote sugar in your body will negatively impact your health. The word sugar is misleading and fails to describe the fundamental difference between refined sweeteners and naturally occurring carbohydrate energy found in whole foods. Scientists, medical professionals, and people with diabetes often lump all carbs into the same category and do not adequately differentiate between packaged and processed foods like breads, cereals, and pastas, and whole foods like fruits, starchy vegetables, legumes, and intact whole grains. We thoroughly researched studies commonly used by the low-carbohydrate community to debunk low-fat diets and found that every single one of these publications do not study a truly low-fat diet. They compare very low-carbohydrate diets against diets containing 25 to 35% fat and containing significant amounts of animal foods, and erroneously conclude that eating carbohydrates worsens your long-term health. In contrast, scientific investigations performed in people eating a truly low-fat diet containing less than 15% of total calories result in increased insulin sensitivity. There isn't a single study that shows that carbohydrate-rich whole foods eaten in a truly low-fat environment doesn't improve insulin sensitivity. In addition, studies performed in subjects fed a highly processed carbohydrate-rich diet in a low-fat environment also demonstrate significantly improved insulin sensitivity. Your blood glucose is influenced by many variables and is best understood when considering the amount and type of carbohydrate you eat, the amount and type of fat you eat, and most important, the overall nutrient density of your diet. When you eat food that contains carbohydrates, your body cuts long-chain carbohydrates into smaller pieces, and then eventually to chains that are 1, 2, or 3 monosaccharide pieces long, thanks to an enzyme called amylase that is secreted by your mouth and small intestine. These monosaccharide molecules end in O's and include compounds like glucose, ribose, galactose, and fructose, just to name a few. Monosaccharides are commonly referred to as sugar in conventional textbooks, but we choose not to use the word sugar in this context because the word sugar refers to a refined sweetener that you buy at the grocery store. For the remainder of this book, we will refer to natural sugars as monosaccharides and man-made sugars as refined sugars because they have drastically different metabolic effects. When glucose enters your blood following a carbohydrate-rich meal, it first travels to your liver via a highway known as the portal vein. Your liver is given first crack at this fresh supply of glucose and can either take it up to burn immediately for energy, store it as glycogen, the stored form of glucose, for later use, or allow it to remain in your blood for other tissues to use. Your pancreas contains beta cells, a highly specialized group of cells found in clusters. Beta cells release small amounts of first-phase insulin to help your liver take up glucose from the portal vein, then later release second-phase insulin once larger amounts of glucose get into general circulation. Insulin is an extremely powerful hormone that acts as a key to unlock millions of cellular doors located on the surface of cells all over your body. Insulin itself does not raise your risk for chronic disease. Excess insulin beyond your normal physiological level is what causes severe metabolic dysfunction and increases your risk for many chronic diseases over the course of time. When insulin knocks on the door of cells inside tissues all over your body, they are given the opportunity to import glucose from your blood if, and only if, they have the ability to recognize insulin's presence. Your muscles and liver are the largest insulin-dependent tissues in your body, accounting for the majority of glucose absorption. Your brain also uptakes large amounts of glucose, but requires only a fraction of the insulin that your muscles and liver require. Since insulin's job is to escort glucose into tissues, when cells can't recognize insulin well, they reject it. When cells reject insulin, glucose gets trapped in your blood for extended periods of time, causing high blood glucose. To compensate, your pancreas releases more insulin in the hope of overpowering these cells to import more glucose. Fatty acids directly inhibit the action of insulin, and the amount of fat you eat and the type of fat you eat are the primary determinants of how insulin resistant you become over the course of time. That's right, the more fat you eat, especially saturated fat, the more insulin resistant you become. An overwhelming amount of scientific evidence shows that a high-fat diet is the single most effective method at inducing insulin resistance in both your liver and muscle. These studies clearly demonstrate that increasing your fat intake has an immediate negative impact on the ability of insulin to communicate with tissues, which can then develop into a chronic state of insulin resistance and diabetes if your fat intake remains high. Insulin resistance is caused by the accumulation of excess fat in tissues that are not designed to store large quantities of fat. In your small intestine, two important processes occur. First, cells in the lining of your small intestine absorb these fat-soluble nutrients and package them into particles called chylomicrons, which are then dumped into your lymphatic system, a collection of vessels that carry lymphatic fluid to the blood and clear waste compounds from tissues. When the lymphatic fluid ushers chylomicrons into your blood, they are circulated throughout your body so that your adipose tissue and muscle have the first chance to uptake triglycerides from your food. When your small intestine detects fat-soluble nutrients in your food, it releases a collection of powerful hormones that communicate with your brain and stomach to control your appetite and slow your gastric emptying rate, or the rate at which food exits your stomach. The presence of dietary fat slows the digestion of all food material, causing a temporary traffic jam in your stomach. This is one reason why diets high in fat are effective at curbing your appetite and making you feel full for long periods of time. As a result of the simultaneous fat absorption into your lymphatic system and slowed gastric emptying rate, both carbohydrate and protein digestion are slowed. The net consequence is that fat-rich chylomicrons appear in your blood more rapidly than glucose, one of the building blocks of carbohydrates, and amino acids, the building blocks of protein. When fat-rich chylomicron particles have circulated throughout your body and offloaded triglycerides, your liver then uptakes the remaining particles, called chylomicron remnants. The triglyceride molecules are then transferred into lipoprotein particles and sent out in your blood once again. With the help of enzymes located on the surface of cells throughout your body, tissues absorb fatty acids and cholesterol from these lipoproteins. Unlike glucose, fatty acids can enter cells easily without requiring an escort like insulin. As soon as the fatty acids are absorbed by cells in your liver and muscle tissue, they are either burned for energy or stored for later use. Fatty acids will continue to enter cells as long as they are present in your blood, And unfortunately, cells don't have sophisticated mechanisms to block large amounts from entering. Unlike other tissues with a distinct location in your body, such as your brain, heart, or lungs, your adipose tissue, also called fat, is located in many places. Fatty acids are easily absorbed because your adipose tissue contains the perfect molecular machinery to uptake and store fatty acids for long periods of time. Adipose tissue is actually a protective organ. Your adipose tissue is designed to grow and shrink in response to times of feast and times of famine, storing energy at times when there are excess calories available to protect you for when calories are sparse. In addition, your adipose tissue also protects tissues like your liver and muscle from accumulating excess fatty acids by giving them another location to end up. Cells in your adipose tissue can swell and break when chronically overfed, triggering a low-grade inflammation that reduces the ability of insulin to function properly. Since fatty acids appear before glucose during the digestion process, your muscles and liver are exposed to more fatty acids than glucose, setting the stage for insulin resistance when glucose becomes more readily available. When your muscles and liver uptake fatty acids from your blood, they also upregulate enzymes involved in all aspects of fatty acid metabolism and downregulate enzymes involved in all aspects of glucose metabolism, because fatty acids are now the predominant fuel. Unlike your adipose tissue, which is specifically designed to store fat to protect other organs from fat overload, your muscle and liver tissues are designed to store small amounts of fat and large amounts of glycogen. But when your liver and muscles first absorb fat from your blood following a fat-rich meal, they respond by rejecting insulin to block glucose from entering, because they have already accepted fatty acids as their primary energy source. One of the most common side effects of eating a high-fat diet is fatty liver disease, also known as non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Fatty liver disease occurs when the amount of fat in your liver is more than 5% by weight, resulting in liver enlargement, which can then lead to liver fibrosis, a condition marked by the formation of scar tissue. Insulin resistance functions like a brick wall, blocking the ability of insulin to communicate with cells, which traps glucose in your blood. Excess insulin acts like a wrecking ball, knocking a hole in the brick wall and allowing glucose to enter cells and tissues all over your body. When insulin is readily available following a meal, your liver decreases the amount of glucose it exports. When insulin is less available after multiple hours of fasting, your liver increases the rate at which it exports glucose in order to drip feed your brain with a stable supply. When you develop insulin resistance in your liver due to the accumulation of excess dietary fat, your liver can't communicate with insulin very effectively, resulting in a chronically high rate of glucose export, high fasting blood glucose, and high post-meal blood glucose. In effect, an accumulation of excess fatty acids prevents your liver from accurately controlling how much glucose it releases into your blood. Beta cells in your pancreas have one function: to manufacture and secrete insulin into your blood. They make up less than 1% of your total pancreas by weight, representing a very small population of cells. Your body has no backup mechanism for producing insulin, so when your beta cell function is compromised, it presents a disastrous metabolic problem to tissues all over your body. In the same way that your liver and muscles are highly sensitive to the accumulation of fat, so are beta cells. The accumulation of excess fat in your beta cells leads to severe dysfunction known as lipotoxicity. There comes a point in life of a stressed beta cell when it is more advantageous to commit suicide than to stay alive. At this point, beta cells undergo a process known as apoptosis, or programmed cell death. Some individuals retain 60% of their original beta cell mass, whereas others will drop to as low as 20%. Autopsies have revealed that in the majority of patients with type 2 diabetes, more than half of the beta cell population has died. After the age of 20, your body stops making new beta cells, therefore beta cell death is considered irreversible. Even when beta cell mass has been significantly compromised, the remaining beta cell population is often capable of producing sufficient insulin for all tissues, but only if you take steps to reduce your body's insulin needs by increasing your insulin sensitivity. Insulin resistance cannot be seen from the outside. It is a condition that reflects the internal state of your liver, muscles, adipose tissue, pancreas, and blood vessels. It can affect you no matter how much you weigh. Unlike type 2 diabetes, type 1 and 1.5 diabetes occur when your own immune system targets beta cells for destruction, leaving them incapable of manufacturing enough insulin to maintain your blood glucose within the normal range of 80 to 130 milligrams per deciliter. Even though type 2 diabetes is caused by insulin resistance and type 1 and 1.5 diabetes result from an autoimmune reaction, the diet-induced insulin resistance present in both conditions is biologically identical. When you're living with autoimmune diabetes and also develop insulin resistance from your diet, you develop double diabetes, a term used to describe people living with both autoimmune diabetes and the symptoms of type 2 diabetes. Double diabetes is a life-threatening combination of health conditions that makes controlling your blood glucose virtually impossible, as glucose routinely gets trapped in your blood, unable to enter your muscle and liver in large quantities. All fat is not created equal. Fat-rich animal foods, meat, fish, dairy, eggs, poultry and processed meat products, and refined carbohydrates, sugar-sweetened beverages, pastries, cookies, crackers, and breads, as well as vegetable, nut, and seed oils, will have the most dramatic impact on the development of insulin resistance and will increase your risk for chronic disease. Trans fatty acids are a type of fat that occurs naturally in very small quantities in beef, pork, lamb, butter, and milk, between 1 and 10% of total fat content. However, the overwhelming majority of trans fats in most people's diets originate from a process known as hydrogenation, a chemical manufacturing process that food manufacturers use to convert unsaturated fatty acids into saturated fatty acids. Trans fatty acids are associated with an increasing list of cardiovascular conditions, including congestive heart disease, stroke, atherosclerosis, high cholesterol, and high blood pressure. Saturated fatty acids are naturally occurring fatty acids that are found in all whole foods, but mainly in meat, poultry, fish, shellfish, dairy products, butter, cheese, milk, yogurt, sour cream, ice cream, and whipped cream, and eggs, but also present in higher amounts in plant foods, including vegetable oils, coconut oil, palm kernel oil, cocoa butter, avocados, coconuts, nuts, and seeds. Diets high in saturated fat are effective, short-term treatments to lose weight and normalize blood glucose, but they significantly increase your level of insulin resistance, which in turn increases your risk for many chronic diseases and premature death in the long term. Saturated fatty acids directly interfere with insulin signaling within hours of entering muscle and liver cells, inhibiting the ability of your muscle and liver to uptake glucose from your blood. While small amounts of saturated fat, 1 to 5 grams per day, do not pose a significant threat to your glucose metabolism, the consumption of large amounts of saturated fat, more than about 10 grams per day, triggers a series of adverse biochemical reactions in your muscle, liver, pancreas, and adipose tissue, which rapidly create an insulin-resistant state that can last for a minimum of 1 to 2 days. Diets high in saturated fat are also especially dangerous for your liver, as they are extremely effective at promoting fatty liver disease, which can eventually lead to liver cirrhosis and induce an advanced state of liver insulin resistance and liver inflammation. When excess saturated fat accumulates in liver cells over the course of time, it increases the rate at which the cells offload glucose and triglycerides into your blood, leading to increased glucose production, increased triglycerides, and increased LDL cholesterol. Low-density lipoprotein, LDL cholesterol, is considered bad cholesterol because scientists have discovered that the more LDL cholesterol you have in your blood, the higher your risk for an acute cardiac event. This is because LDL particles deliver cholesterol to tissues, and LDL particles can often get trapped in the lining of blood vessels, increasing your risk for atherosclerosis. High-density lipoprotein, HDL cholesterol, on the other hand, is considered your good cholesterol because it is involved in reverse cholesterol transport, pulling cholesterol out of tissues and returning it to your liver. For years, the medical world has focused on reducing cardiovascular disease risk by finding ways to increase HDL cholesterol, but research now shows that reducing your LDL cholesterol is significantly more effective at preventing and reversing cardiovascular disease. Eating saturated fat abundantly raises your LDL cholesterol more than any other nutrient in your diet, including dietary cholesterol itself. Unsaturated fatty acids are the least harmful of the three fat types and offer significant protection against the development of insulin resistance when eaten in small quantities. Within the unsaturated fat family are two types of fatty acids: monounsaturated fatty acids, MUFAs, and polyunsaturated fatty acids, PUFAs. MUFAs are considered non-essential fatty acids because your body can synthesize them endogenously. Translation: your body has the ability to make them in-house. PUFAs, on the other hand, are considered essential because your body cannot manufacture them. All whole foods contain unsaturated fat without exception. There is no single whole food that does not contain fat, even unusual suspects like bananas, carrots, lettuce, potatoes, and beans. We strongly encourage you to eat no more than 15% of your total calories in fat in order to maximize your insulin sensitivity. That means that we recommend eating small quantities of nuts, seeds, and other high-fat plants like avocados, coconuts, and olives in order to keep your total fat intake below this threshold. Contributing culprits: animal foods. There is a large body of compelling research that demonstrates how eating meat and dairy not only increases your risk for high blood glucose, insulin resistance, weight gain, increased fasting glucose, and increased fasting insulin concentrations, but also causes inflammation and promotes heart disease and hypertension over the course of time. There is a consistent and strong positive association between all meat consumption and type 2 diabetes risk, regardless of the type or degree of processing. Most important, every one of these studies found a positive association between meat consumption and diabetes risk, removing significant doubt about the detrimental effect of eating any type of meat, whether red or white, processed or unprocessed. When it comes to eggs, we recommend reducing or eliminating them altogether, and instead eating nutrient-dense anti-inflammatory plant-based foods. Meat and dairy products contain high amounts of leucine, an amino acid that activates a high-energy biochemical pathway known as mTOR in your beta cells, muscle, liver, adipose tissue, and brain. Frequently eating meat and dairy products can overstimulate the mTOR pathway in these tissues, and when this happens, the tissues enter a prolonged high-energy state in which many biochemical pathways go awry. This includes A. Fatty acid accumulation and muscle in the liver, B. Chronic liver glucose export, C. Increased insulin secretion, D. Increased beta cell reproduction, and E. Eventual beta cell suicide. The metabolic effects of iron in many tissues is very clear. Iron itself is not dangerous. It's the intake and storage of excess iron that leads to biochemical complications that significantly increase your risk for type 2 diabetes. Iron in food is found in two forms: heme iron and non-heme iron. Heme iron is found predominantly in animal foods. People who eat non-heme iron do not increase their risk for the development of beta cell death and insulin resistance, suggesting that both the amount and the type of iron are important indicators of your risk for elevated blood glucose. Nitrates are naturally occurring compounds found in certain vegetables. Nitrates and nitrites are compounds that are added to meat products because they act as antimicrobials and enhance the color and flavor of cured meats. In food as well as in your digestive system, nitrate is converted into nitrite by bacteria, and then further converted into a family of molecules known as N-nitroso compounds or nitrosamines. Nitrosamine compounds are known to be beta cell toxins that can directly trigger oxidative stress and beta cell death. Research has shown that consumption of foods with a high nitrite and nitrosamine content has been associated with the development of type 1 diabetes. Nitrate-rich vegetables like beets, spinach, arugula, and Swiss chard contain large amounts of nitrate compounds that stimulate the production of nitric oxide in your blood, reduce your blood pressure, and improve oxygen delivery to muscles. These nitrate compounds found in vegetables come prepackaged with a host of micronutrients, including vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, and phytochemicals thought to block the conversion of nitrate into nitrosamine compounds. There is little debate that excess dietary sodium increases blood pressure, damages the inside of blood vessels, known as your endothelium, and promotes the hardening of blood vessels all around your body. A single pinch of salt can impair the flexibility of blood vessels by as much as 50% within 1 to 2 hours of eating a meal, and a quarter of a teaspoon of salt can block blood vessels dilation by as much as 75%. Advanced glycation end products, AGEs, are a diverse collection of compounds that are created in your body and are also found in the food you eat. In your food, AGEs are formed when you cook at high temperatures and when you cook in low moisture environments. Frying, broiling, grilling, and roasting increase AGE production in food, while boiling, poaching, stewing, and steaming limit AGE production substantially. In addition to causing or exacerbating type 2 diabetes, high AGE levels also promote atherosclerosis, neuropathy, inflammation, endothelial damage, and kidney disease. Even though many people think of autoimmune conditions as being caused by poor genetics, a collection of fascinating research now shows that drinking milk and eating meat can both increase your risk for type 1 diabetes and type 1.5 diabetes, in addition to Crohn's disease, via a specific pathogen known as Mycobacterium avium paratuberculosis, MAP. MAP is a mycobacterium, or a bacteria that grows like a fungus, and has been shown to influence susceptibility to autoimmune type 1 diabetes. MAP is present in milk and dairy products that you purchase at the grocery store, including raw milk, bulk milk, pasteurized milk, infant food formula, cheese, ice cream, and flavored milk drinks. How exactly does autoimmunity happen in the first place? The process is known as molecular mimicry, a sneaky tactic used by various bacteria and viruses in which pathogenic proteins attempt to evade detection by the human immune system by disguising themselves as mammalian proteins. In both young children and adults, microscopic holes in the lining of your gut wall allow pathogenic proteins to pass directly from your digestive system into your blood before they have been sufficiently cut by digestive enzymes. Once these pathogenic proteins are present in your blood, your immune system recognizes them as foreign proteins and mounts an immune response that targets them for destruction. But because these pathogenic proteins contain specific regions that mimic proteins found in your body, your immune system can mistakenly target proteins on human cells in tissues all over your body for destruction, setting the stage for an autoimmune reaction. When infected with MAP, your immune system manufactures antibodies that mistakenly attack the ZNT8 protein on the surface of beta cells, targeting them for destruction. In participants aged 50 to 65 years old, people eating the most protein were 74% more likely to die from any cause and were more than 4 times as likely to die from cancer, as compared with those in the low protein group. When the researchers separated those who ate animal-based protein from those who ate plant-based protein, they found that, quote, high levels of animal proteins promote mortality and that plant-based proteins have a protective effect, unquote. In people who did not have diabetes at the beginning of the study, those in the low protein group had the lowest incidence of diabetes mortality. Those in the moderate protein group had a 23-fold increase in their risk for death from diabetes, and those in the high protein group had a 73-fold increase in their risk of death from diabetes. While a top-down view of the research may suggest that eating fish is less problematic than eating meat, the environmental pollutants present in many waterways around the world present another danger altogether. Toxic substances commonly found in fish include heavy metals, dioxin, PCBs, PBDEs, and pesticides. Even though plant foods can also be contaminated with organic pollutants, the reason why fish consistently tests higher for mercury, dioxins, PCBs, PBDEs, and many organic pesticides is because of a process known as bioaccumulation. These persistent organic pollutants, POPs, enter waterways aided by rain, and many of them settle to the bottom of lakes, rivers, and ocean floors along with other sediment. Small fish ingest these compounds while bottom feeding. Larger fish eat those bottom feeders, ingesting not only the flesh but also the contaminants within the flesh. Larger fish then eat those fish, and the process continues all the way up the food chain. Your Carbohydrate Masterclass. Carbohydrates are nothing more than chains of monosaccharide molecules. Most people don't use the word monosaccharide because it's cumbersome. Instead, we use the word sugar. In an effort to clear up any confusion, we refer to natural sugars as monosaccharides and man-made sugars as refined sugars. Table sugar, otherwise known as sucrose, is a classic example of a refined sugar. Table sugar is the end product of a manufacturing process that began with a whole food like sugarcane or sugar beets, and is a crystalline substance that contains only glucose and fructose. The manufacturing process stripped the original whole food of protective micronutrients, including vitamins, minerals, fiber, water, antioxidants, and phytochemicals, rendering the final product nutritionally useless. When you eat foods containing carbohydrates, these chains are broken down into their individual monosaccharide units by digestive enzymes, known as amylases. Beginning in your mouth and continuing all the way to the small intestine, these enzymes act as scissors, cutting carbohydrate chains into smaller monosaccharide chains at every step of the process. Once inside your small intestine, single monosaccharide molecules are absorbed through the walls of your intestine and passed to the capillary blood vessels to be distributed all throughout your body. There are more than 20 commonly occurring monosaccharides that can be combined in many ways to create a virtually endless array of carbohydrate chains of varying length. Short-chain carbohydrates are formed by combining between 2 and 10 monosaccharide sugars, whereas long-chain carbohydrates are formed by combining hundreds to thousands. Glucose and fructose are the most abundant monosaccharides found in plants. Glucose is found in both short-chain carbohydrates like sucrose, found in table sugar, and lactose, found in dairy products like milk and soft cheeses. When it comes to long-chain starchy carbohydrates like amylose and amylopectin, commonly found in potatoes, squash, beans, lentils, and intact whole grains, as well as cellulose fiber, glucose is not only abundant, it is the only monosaccharide building block. The difference between the structure of starchy carbohydrates and that of fiber is the way in which the glucose molecules are linked together. Starchy carbohydrate molecules can be cut by your digestive enzymes. Fiber cannot, because humans don't make the required enzyme cellulase. But that's okay, because trillions of bacteria in your microbiome can fully metabolize fiber and use it for energy to help them replicate and colonize the inside lining of your large intestine. Refined sweeteners like sucrose, high fructose corn syrup, and dextrose result from a manufacturing process in which a whole fruit, vegetable, or grain is subjected to a combination of steps involving cutting, milling, cracking, grinding, washing, extracting, boiling, steaming, condensing, and drying. The final product is a solid crystal, powder, flour, or syrup. We recommend staying clear of refined sweeteners because they can make your blood glucose extremely difficult to control. In addition, refined sweeteners can overstimulate your taste buds, which in turn programs neurological signals in your brain to expect unnaturally sweet flavors when you eat. In effect, refined sweeteners numb your taste buds to the flavors present in natural whole foods, making whole foods seem less appetizing. The difference between intact whole grains and refined grains is simple. Intact whole grains keep their outside bran and germ intact, whereas refined grains are stripped of both, leaving you with just the inside endosperm. Food manufacturers remove the bran and germ in intact whole grains in order to prolong their shelf life. Refined grains are just the starchy inside, containing significantly less fiber and fewer antioxidants, vitamins, minerals, and protective phytochemicals than their intact whole grain counterparts. If you've ever experienced a high blood glucose within a few hours of eating a product containing refined grains, that's likely because the flour used to make the food absorbed into your blood extremely quickly, overpowering the ability of your liver and pancreas to control your blood glucose. Simply switching to a true intact whole grain product not made from flour can dramatically improve your blood glucose control in the hours following your meal. The net result of a single meal containing refined carbohydrates is a cascade of adverse effects to your liver, blood vessels, heart, adipose tissue, and muscle. The consumption of refined carbohydrates is very effective at causing liver insulin resistance, fatty liver, increased LDL cholesterol, increased triglycerides, increased adipose tissue fat, and increased muscle fat. Given that the majority of your stool is composed of pure bacteria, the more food you eat in its whole state, the happier your bacteria become. The more immune-boosting short-chain fatty acids they produce, the more they multiply and colonize your gut, and the more regularly they are replaced by new bacteria. Whole carbohydrate-rich foods are made up of long-chain molecules and are found mainly in plant foods like fruits, vegetables, beans, lentils, and peas, and in whole grains like brown rice, buckwheat, millet, and barley. The carbohydrate chains in whole foods come prepackaged with micronutrients, including vitamins, minerals, fiber, water, antioxidants, and phytochemicals. Vitamins are essential compounds that assist in thousands of biochemical reactions in tissues all throughout your body. There are 13 known vitamins, and they are classified into two groups: fat-soluble vitamins and water-soluble vitamins. Fat-soluble vitamins, A, E, and K, are widely available in fruits, starchy vegetables, legumes, intact whole grains, non-starchy vegetables, and leafy greens. Vitamin D is generated by exposing your skin to the sun. Water-soluble vitamins are present in fruits, starchy vegetables, legumes, intact whole grains, non-starchy vegetables, and leafy greens. These include the B vitamins as well as vitamin C, which have a diverse collection of functions in many tissues in your body. Minerals are essential nutrients that originate from the earth and cannot be made by living organisms. In humans, the major minerals we require include calcium, potassium, sodium, phosphorus, and magnesium, and the trace minerals iron, sulfur, molybdenum, chlorine, copper, zinc, manganese, cobalt, iodine, and selenium. All of these minerals play vital functions in your body. Scientists used to believe that fiber merely helped sweep undigested food material and excess cholesterol into the toilet, promoting normal digestive function and helping to protect you against heart disease, hypertension, and certain types of cancer. However, we now know that fiber is actually food, not for you, but for the microbiome housed in your large intestine. Your body is home to approximately 38 trillion bacteria, and the majority of those bacteria live in your large intestine and on your skin, but other bacterial populations exist in your mouth, your small intestine, and your stomach. The most recent estimates suggest that your body is composed of about 45% human cells and 55% bacterial cells. When bacteria in your large intestine metabolize fiber for energy, they make compounds known as short-chain fatty acids that have broad anti-inflammatory effects, help boost immune function, and minimize your risk for chronic disease. Many people would call us crazy for labeling water as a micronutrient. The reason we do so is because, much like vitamins and minerals, water assists in thousands of chemical reactions in your blood and in your tissues, and is an underappreciated component of whole foods that rarely gets mentioned. When you eat plants, you actually eat water, which helps you keep hydrated, improves both mental and physical performance, and may reduce the amount of water you need to drink in order to stay fully hydrated. Antioxidants are compounds found in brightly colored plant foods and in animal foods to a much smaller extent. They neutralize free radicals in your blood and tissues and protect you against inflammation. Free radicals are unstable molecules that are generated by a wide range of experiences, both harmful and beneficial, including breathing, eating, exercising, stress, alcohol consumption, ultraviolet radiation, and exposure to environmental chemicals. Free radicals are created when a molecule loses an electron, resulting in a highly unstable compound that bombards neighboring molecules in search of stability. In the hunt for stability, free radicals bombard DNA, proteins, and lipids and are capable of causing extensive cellular damage. Plant foods contain on average 64 times more antioxidant content than animal foods. Antioxidants are pigments that are easily recognizable as bright colors in fruits and vegetables. At some point in your life, you may have been told to eat the rainbow, which is actually excellent advice because it ensures that you get a wide variety of highly potent and biologically active antioxidants every time you eat. Plants manufacture phytochemicals to grow and to protect themselves against competitors, pathogens, and predators. Phytochemicals are absolute biological powerhouses that inhibit tumor growth, prevent platelet aggregation and blood clots, relax blood vessels, improve insulin sensitivity, stimulate insulin production, improve neurological activity, fight against harmful bacteria, reduce cholesterol, and improve immune function. Foods containing refined carbohydrates and refined sweeteners may lead to large increases in glucose in your blood immediately following a meal. When your liver is exposed to large concentrations of glucose in a short period of time, your brain responds by increasing your total energy expenditure to waste excess calories. In an effort to dispose of this excess glucose, your liver seeks alternative biochemical pathways too. One of these pathways results in the conversion of glucose to fat, known as de novo lipogenesis, DNL. De novo lipogenesis is a very well-studied and unnecessarily controversial phenomenon in animals and humans, and occurs to a small extent either when you increase your intake of refined carbohydrate foods or when you massively overeat calories. Dr. Mark Hellerstein, one of the world's foremost authorities on DNL, and colleagues at the University of California at Berkeley have conclusively demonstrated the following. High-fat diet. In people who eat a high-fat, low-carbohydrate diet containing between 100 and 200 grams of fat per day, less than 1 gram of newly synthesized fatty acids is made from DNL per day. Low-fat diet. In people who eat a high-carbohydrate diet containing between 65 and 75% carbohydrate and 10 to 20% fat per day, DNL accounted for less than 10 grams of newly synthesized fatty acids per day. Massive overfeeding. Experiments have shown that DNL occurs in substantial quantities only in people who massively overeat carbohydrate energy. Experiments show that people who eat approximately 2,000 grams of carbohydrate energy per day, 4,500 calories of excess energy, for 7 to 10 days at a time manufacture about 150 grams of newly synthesized fatty acids from DNL per day. The glucose that is stored for later use is stored as glycogen, a densely packed tree-like structure containing thousands of glucose molecules. Think of liver glycogen as a glucose fuel tank that can be accessed whenever liver cells need it. Only your liver and muscle can store large quantities of glycogen, and the amount of glycogen stored in both tissues directly relates to the amount of carbohydrate in your diet. Your brain is unique in that it has an extremely strong preference for glucose as fuel, as evidenced by a high reliance on enzymatic machinery that is perfectly designed to extract ATP from glucose at all times. In a given day, your brain will burn up to 60% of all the glucose in circulation because it is the largest consumer of glucose in your body and does not possess the ability to burn amino acids from protein or fatty acids from lipids. Your muscles are the second largest consumer of glucose and will absorb 20 to 30% of the glucose in your blood with the help of insulin. The ketogenic diet versus a low-fat, plant-based whole food diet. A comparison of short-term and long-term results. In the world of ketogenic diets, people are told to eat a very low carbohydrate diet in order to achieve a metabolic state known as ketosis, in which your muscles and liver derive the bulk of their energy from fatty acids and amino acids instead of from glucose found in carbohydrates. To do so, people are told to eat 70 to 90% of calories of fat from meat, eggs, sausages, heavy cream, cheeses, fish, nuts, butter, oils, seeds, non-starchy vegetables, avocados, coconuts, and small amounts of berries, while avoiding almost all fruits, starchy vegetables, breads, pastas, legumes, milk, and yogurt. Many people around the world who eat a ketogenic diet are able to lose weight, achieve a flatline blood glucose profile, greatly reduce or eliminate their need for oral medication and insulin, and reduce their total cholesterol. The short-term benefits associated with a ketogenic diet can also easily be achieved using a low-fat, plant-based whole food diet. Low-fat, plant-based whole food nutrition is the only approach shown to reverse heart disease, the leading cause of death of people living with all forms of diabetes, whereas diets high in saturated fat and cholesterol have been shown to promote heart disease. The ketogenic diet was originally developed in the 1920s as a treatment to reduce the frequency of seizures in children suffering from intractable epilepsy. At the time, researchers thought that they could induce ketosis as well as a condition known as metabolic acidosis, both of which were known to have anticonvulsant effects. What researchers also noticed was that a ketogenic diet often stimulated rapid weight loss, flatline blood glucose, reduced cholesterol, and reduced blood pressure. A ketogenic diet almost always raises LDL cholesterol levels. And remember, LDL particles are the lipid particle known to have the highest correlation with cardiovascular disease, which means that irrespective of other health benefits, a ketogenic diet is likely to raise your cardiovascular mortality risk. Based on the short-term evidence, a ketogenic diet is a very effective tool at promoting short-term improvements in body weight, blood glucose, A1C, and triglyceride levels. In the long term, however, eating a ketogenic diet is unlikely to provide the same results, and it's more likely to pose risks, as is the general class of low-carbohydrate diets. In large-scale studies performed over long periods of time, the evidence-based literature consistently shows that low-carbohydrate diets worsen long-term health, increase the risk for many chronic diseases, increase the risk for infectious diseases, and increase mortality. No matter how hard you look for long-term evidence to support a diet including more animal protein, more saturated fat, and fewer carbohydrates, the results tell the same story. Carbohydrate restriction in the long term is associated with increased risk for chronic disease and all-cause mortality. No matter how you slice it, the supposed long-term health benefits of eating a low-carbohydrate diet simply don't add up. Given that the long-term data above shows that eating more plant protein in substitution for animal protein is associated with increased longevity, it stands to reason that modifying the typical animal-based ketogenic diet with a plant-based version could benefit you both in the short and long term. Many medical professionals and people with diabetes focus their efforts on reducing total insulin use instead of paying attention to a more valuable metric that directly influences your risk for chronic disease: your 24-hour carbohydrate to insulin ratio. Your carbohydrate to insulin ratio is an excellent indicator of your overall insulin sensitivity and is easily measurable for those living with insulin-dependent diabetes. The higher your carbohydrate to insulin ratio, the higher your insulin sensitivity and the lower your risk for chronic disease. Conversely, the lower your carbohydrate to insulin ratio is, the lower your insulin sensitivity and the higher your risk for chronic disease. Even though a plant-based ketogenic diet is extremely effective at reducing your total insulin use, it does so at the expense of reduced carbohydrate intake, resulting in a low carbohydrate to insulin ratio, a high degree of insulin resistance, and a greatly diminished carbohydrate tolerance. If a ketogenic diet was the only way to improve your metabolic health in the short term, then the benefits would certainly outweigh the prospect of no improvements at all. However, practically all diets work in the short term because diets prompt you to pay attention to the quality of the food that you're eating, how much you're eating, when you're eating, and how you feel between meals. The difference between dietary approaches becomes much more apparent over the course of time, and those that create long-term sustainable habits and provide lasting metabolic fitness will always beat out those that are unsustainable, as well as those that negatively impact your long-term metabolic health. What Dr. Sweeney discovered was remarkable. Those who ate the high-fat diet and those who fasted both experienced the worst carbohydrate tolerance. All subjects in the high-fat group experienced abnormally high blood glucose values, and all blood glucose values remained greater than 140 milligrams per deciliter after 120 minutes. Subjects in the high protein group also experienced elevated blood glucose values as well, albeit less pronounced than those in the high fat and fasting groups. Subjects who ate the high carbohydrate diet experienced modest rises in their blood glucose, and all high carbohydrate eaters experienced blood glucose values between 80 to 140 milligrams per deciliter after 120 minutes. Walter Kempner, MD, at Duke University demonstrated that high-fat diets not only cause insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes, but that patients could begin reversing long-standing diabetic retinopathy in a matter of days by eating a highly processed diet that included fruit and fruit juice. Dr. Kempner is famous for inventing the rice-fruit diet, in which he allowed his patients to eat only white rice, fruit, fruit juice, and added sugar, 4 foods that mainstream diabetes nutrition experts condemn entirely. As far as large-scale research is concerned, we run into a similar problem as we did when analyzing ketogenic diet studies. There are no available long-term studies that demonstrate the effect of a truly low-fat, plant-based whole food diet in large numbers of people over long periods of time. With that said, we can look to large-scale evidence that analyzes the long-term effects of people who increase their intake of fruits, vegetables, legumes, and intact whole grains in substitution for fat and protein-rich foods from animal sources, because it provides excellent context for what is likely to happen to those eating a truly low-fat plant-based whole food diet over the course of time. Evidence from the EPIC study in more than 500,000 people over the course of 12 years demonstrated that eating glucose and fructose found in food does not increase your risk for diabetes. Instead, it decreases your risk for diabetes, as long as your intake of saturated fat and/or protein decreases. They concluded that replacing 5% of a diet containing saturated fatty acids with fructose from either fruit or refined sources is associated with a 30% decreased risk of diabetes, and that replacing 5% of protein with fructose is associated with a 28% reduction in diabetes risk. It's essential to eat a diet that not only helps you control your blood glucose, but also protects your heart and blood vessels both today and into the future. That's because a low-fat plant-based whole food diet is the only diet documented to both arrest and reverse heart disease. By contrast, low-carbohydrate diets high in animal products may help you control your blood glucose, but actually increase your risk for heart disease. Instead of thinking about how to follow a specialized diet to specifically address insulin resistance, think about this lifestyle as a nutrient-dense dietary solution, not only to prevent and reverse diabetes, but also to prevent and reverse chronic diseases that affect your heart, blood vessels, liver, kidney, brain, pancreas, and other vital organs. Eating a diet rich in unprocessed plants is designed to flood every cell of your body with bioavailable micronutrients required for optimal tissue function. Getting started with a mastering diabetes method. We don't recommend making sudden drastic changes. This method is designed to help you ease into this lifestyle step by step, monitoring how your blood glucose responds along the way. As the quantity of stored fat in your muscle and liver decreases, your muscle and liver will regain their ability to respond to insulin, allowing glucose to enter tissues easily. As both your liver and muscle become better at recognizing and responding to insulin, your blood glucose is likely to decrease significantly. What we found is that during the first 30 days of this program, most people fall into one of the following 3 categories: slow responder, medium responder, or fast responder. These categories do not indicate whether you're winning or losing, they are an indicator of how your body responds to the Mastering Diabetes method. Some 70 to 80% of all people are fast responders, even after years of eating a high-fat, nutrient-poor diet. If you are in this category, you may experience a sudden reduction in your blood glucose values in the first few days. Fast responders will greatly benefit from reducing their dosage of both oral and injectable diabetes medications in order to protect against frequent hypoglycemia. There's a long list of genetic and lifestyle considerations that influence the speed of your response, most notably how active you are on a daily basis, the length of time you have been living with diabetes, your body's insulin production, indicated by your C-peptide value, what types of food you've been eating over the past few years, your body fat percentage at the beginning of your transition, your body fat distribution, abdomen versus upper body versus lower body, whether you are also living with other metabolic health conditions, such as high blood pressure, coronary artery disease, chronic kidney disease, fatty liver disease, etc. It doesn't really matter how quickly you respond. The most important thing is that you remain consistent in your approach to the Mastering Diabetes method. Your hemoglobin A1C is used as a marker of your average blood glucose values and is routinely used to track your blood glucose control over time. Your hemoglobin A1C measures the percentage of hemoglobin molecules in red blood cells that have glucose attached to them. And as the amount of glucose in your blood increases, so does the amount of glycosylated hemoglobin. Hemoglobin's job is to transport oxygen into your blood, and because red blood cells have an average lifespan of about 100 to 120 days, doctors recommend that you measure your A1C value approximately every 3 to 4 months. Doctors use the hemoglobin A1C to diagnose prediabetes and type 2 diabetes according to the following criteria: non-diabetic 5.6% or below, prediabetes 5.7 to 6.4%, type 2 diabetes 6.5% and above. Your A1C is an incomplete indicator of your diabetes health. While maintaining a low A1C is certainly important, dropping your A1C does not necessarily indicate that your long-term health is improving. A diet low in nutrient density is a breeding ground for chronic disease, even if your blood glucose is controlled within a tight range and your A1C is low. A diet high in nutrient density protects you against chronic disease, even if your blood glucose control and A1C are elevated during your transition. We created a 3-part system to help you easily identify which foods to eat in abundance, which foods to minimize, and which foods to eliminate altogether. Green light foods, unprocessed whole plant foods naturally low in fat, can be fresh or frozen. Fruits, for example, bananas, mangoes, and oranges. Starchy vegetables, for example, potatoes, butternut squash, corn. Legumes, for example, beans, lentils, peas. Intact whole grains, for example, brown rice, quinoa, farro. Non-starchy vegetables, for example, tomatoes, cucumbers, broccoli. Leafy greens, for example, lettuce, arugula, spinach. Herbs and spices, fresh or dried. Mushrooms, for example, shiitake, cremini, portobello. Yellow light foods, minimally processed or whole plant foods containing a higher fat content, such as avocados, nuts and seeds, nut and seed butters, plant-based milks, coconut meat, soy products, for example, edamame, tofu, tempeh, olives, pasta alternatives, for example, lentil, bean, brown rice, sprouted bread, dried fruits, for example, dates, raisins, dried apricots, fermented foods, for example, sauerkraut, kimchi, coconut kefir. Red light foods, animal products and highly processed foods, such as red meat, white meat, eggs, all dairy products, oils of any kind, fish and shellfish, processed baked goods, for example, croissants, muffins, cookies. Sweeteners, for example, high fructose corn syrup, sourdough, maltodextrin. Refined white foods, for example, white pasta, white bread, white sugar, white flour. Coconut products, processed high-calorie products excluding coconut kefir and aminos, for example, yogurt, ice cream. Processed vegan foods, for example, processed veggie burgers, vegan cheeses, nut milk, ice creams. When you eat a low-fat, plant-based whole food diet, it's not necessary to micromanage your carbohydrate intake. When you're consistently eating a maximum of 15% of your total calories as fat, your body's ability to metabolize whole carbohydrate-rich foods will increase over time, allowing you to eat larger quantities of carbohydrate-rich foods while maintaining excellent blood glucose control. Green light foods are fiber-rich and contain between 60 and 90% water, which means that when they make up the bulk of your meal, they will make you mechanically full and nutritionally full before you become calorically full. Avocados, nuts, seeds, olives, coconut meat, and soy products are all whole foods high in fat, and even though they contain predominantly unsaturated fat, when eaten in large quantities, they too can cause insulin resistance and high blood glucose. As a general rule of thumb, when choosing between two foods like brown rice and brown rice pasta, choose the brown rice because it requires less processing and has a higher micronutrient content than the brown rice pasta. Once you start to build your meals around green light foods, you are likely to become nutritionally satisfied, and cravings for processed foods will likely fade away. Practically all health professionals agree that processed and refined foods are problematic for human health and increase your risk for chronic disease. Despite this, oil has been marketed as a health food, even though it is as refined as white table sugar. Even small amounts can impair the function of insulin receptors in your muscle and liver within hours of a single high-fat meal. People living with insulin-dependent diabetes following the Mastering Diabetes method find that even small amounts of oil in a single meal significantly increase their blood glucose starting about 2 to 6 hours after the meal, which then increases their need for exogenous insulin between 1 and 4 days after that meal. In the same way that we categorize foods using a green, yellow, and red light system, we have developed a similar methodology to help you understand how to think about various beverages on the market today. Green light beverages. We encourage you to enjoy these beverages without concern. These include green juice made from primarily leafy greens, water, carbonated water, and unsweetened herbal teas, all of which contain 0 calories. Staying well hydrated is very important for physical and cognitive performance, gastrointestinal, kidney and heart function, skin health, and the prevention of headaches. The amount of water to drink on a daily basis varies significantly from person to person, so we recommend observing the color of your urine to determine when it's time to hydrate. A light yellow color indicates that you are well hydrated, and a dark yellow color indicates that you are dehydrated. Yellow light beverages. When you drink yellow light beverages, your blood glucose may begin to rise rapidly. If you're seeking optimal diabetes health, we recommend no more than 1 cup of a yellow light beverage per day. Coconut water, plant-based milks, starch-based vegetable juices, kombucha, fresh fruit juices. Red light beverages. Beverages in the red light category have the largest number of liquid calories of any category and have been well documented to raise your blood glucose and cholesterol while promoting full body inflammation. We recommend minimizing or completely avoiding these beverages: alcohol, sodas, sweetened tea, energy drinks, and sport drinks. Our guidelines follow 5 basic rules. Rule 1. Don't count your calories. Just eat until you're satisfied. The beauty of eating low-fat plant-based whole foods is that they are naturally low in calorie density and high in fiber content, both of which are very effective at protecting you against eating excess calories. We recommend being aware of the total grams of fat you are eating, the percentage of your diet coming from carbohydrates, fat, and protein, and your total carbohydrate intake. Rule 2. Pay attention to your total fat consumption. As a general guideline, we suggest eating between 15 and 30 grams of fat per day, which is a simple guideline to target your total fat intake to a maximum of 15% of calories from fat. Rule 3. Remember that all whole foods contain carbohydrate, protein, and fat. All whole plant foods contain fat, and some contain more than others. It may seem strange that fruits and vegetables contain fat and protein, but they do, and the small amounts that you eat in fruits and vegetables contribute to your daily fat and protein total. If you eat a variety of green light foods, approximately 5 to 10% of your calories will come from fat before you eat any higher fat yellow light foods. Rule 4. Treat fruit like your new best friend. Fruit is not to blame for elevated blood glucose. It's the high-fat foods you ate before eating fruit that makes it difficult for your muscles and liver to metabolize glucose effectively. Even though fruits have been relentlessly marketed as simple sugars, they are in fact complex nutritional packets containing an exceptionally high density of micronutrients. Rule 5. Log your food. Creating a daily habit of entering your food into nutrition logging software will pay dividends down the road. Almost without exception, clients who believe they are eating a low-fat diet still discover that their total fat intake is too high to truly maximize their insulin sensitivity, lose weight, gain energy, and minimize or eliminate their need for oral medications and insulin. Understanding the basics of essential fatty acids, EFAs, and fat-soluble vitamins is important and has become unnecessarily confusing over the past 20 years. There are only two EFAs that your body cannot manufacture for itself: alpha-linolenic acid, ALA omega-3, and linoleic acid, LA omega-6. ALA and LA are considered essential because the human body does not possess the enzymatic machinery to manufacture these two fatty acids, and as a result, it's essential to get them from your diet. When you eat ALA and LA, cells and many tissues convert them into longer-chain fatty acids that are either anti-inflammatory or pro-inflammatory. Decrease your intake of omega-6 fatty acids and increase your intake of omega-3 fatty acids so that your omega-6 to omega-3 ratio improves. For reference, the standard American diet has an omega-6 to omega-3 ratio of approximately 20:1. A better ratio for optimal metabolic health is between 4:1 and 1:1. Flooding the omega-6 pathway limits the ability of tissues to produce two important omega-3 compounds known as EPA and DHA. EPA has been shown to be effective at preventing and reversing depression, and DHA is critical for optimal brain and eye function. Together, both EPA and DHA promote the formation of new neurons in your brain, improve memory, and may help prevent against dementia and Alzheimer's disease. It's very important to eat sufficient ALA in order to make sufficient quantities of EPA and DHA. The good news is that this is very easy to do when following the Mastering Diabetes method, because all whole foods have small amounts of ALA. Men should eat 1.6 grams of ALA per day, and women should eat 1.1 grams of ALA per day. The only way to conclusively know your omega-3 status is to test it routinely. By doing so, you can determine whether your diet is providing you with an optimal fatty acid profile and how your diet is affecting your omega-6 to omega-3 ratio. You can measure your fatty acid profile simply and accurately using an at-home blood test via omegaquant.com. By testing your omega-3 status approximately every 4 months, you'll have the knowledge to optimize your diet with precision and determine whether omega-3 supplementation is necessary in addition to eating 1 tablespoon of freshly ground flax seeds or chia seeds per day. Fat-soluble vitamins are a class of vitamins that are essential for optimal tissue function and include vitamins A, D, E, and K. These vitamins are fat-soluble because they are stored in fatty environments in your body and are more absorbable in a fat-rich environment. Eating green light foods can ensure that your intake of all fat-soluble vitamins meets or exceeds nutritional requirements. There are two forms of vitamin A: preformed vitamin A from animal foods and provitamin A carotenoids from plant foods. Preformed vitamin A has zero antioxidant activity, whereas carotenoid compounds found in plants are potent anti-inflammatory antioxidant pigments that give many fruits and vegetables their characteristic red, orange, and yellow colors. Vitamin D is required for normal bone growth and remodeling, and a lack of vitamin D can set the stage for osteopenia and osteoporosis. Research has demonstrated the importance of vitamin D for fighting infections and building a strong immune system. While it has been recognized that obtaining vitamin D from sun exposure is optimal, and studies have shown it's best to expose as much of your body to the sun as possible between the hours of 10 a.m. and 3 p.m., at least 3 times per week, for 15 or 30 minutes per session, this often isn't possible or even sufficient for people who live in places that don't get as much sunlight, such as the northern latitudes. we suggest you maintain a 25-OH vitamin D level of 20 nanograms per milliliter or higher. Vitamin E refers to a group of compounds with potent antioxidant activity that fight free radicals, boost your immune system, and prevent blood clots. Vitamin E donates electrons to neutralize free radicals, and its antioxidant activity can be regenerated in the presence of vitamin C. Vitamin K plays an essential role in blood clotting in response to injury, stimulating bone growth, depositing minerals into bone tissue, and maintaining optimal calcium levels in your blood. The good news is that it's very easy to meet your vitamin K requirements by eating leafy greens. While it is true that adding fat to a meal increases beta-carotene absorption in comparison with a zero-fat meal, keep in mind that when you eat meals containing green light foods, your fat intake is usually between 3 and 10 grams per meal, which significantly improves the absorption of beta-carotene and other fat-soluble vitamins. Besides the fact that the naturally occurring fat content in whole plants is more than enough to absorb carotenoids, it's also important to understand that if a particular meal or snack does not have sufficient quantities of fat to absorb carotenoids into chylomicron particles, carotenoids can be temporarily stored in epithelial cells until an adequate amount of fat present in a subsequent meal becomes available. B12 is a water-soluble vitamin that is necessary for the formation of red blood cells, neurological function, and DNA synthesis. Symptoms of B12 deficiency include anemia, peripheral neuropathy, concentration loss, memory loss, insomnia, impaired bowel and bladder control, appetite loss, flatulence, and constipation. Here's the problem: you don't make vitamin B12. Animals don't make it either. Vitamin B12 is made by bacteria found in the soil, which accumulates in land-grazing animals that eat grass and plants close to the ground. Supplementing vitamin B12 becomes necessary when eating a plant-based diet. While you can get some B12 from foods such as brewer's yeast and nutritional yeast, which is a green light condiment by the way, we still recommend taking a supplement. Getting to know your new needs, diagnostic blood tests, and managing oral medications. If you have been diagnosed with prediabetes or type 2 diabetes and are unable to control your blood glucose after 1 to 3 months following our recommendations, we suggest getting 2 blood tests, which give you and your doctor a much clearer picture on what's going on in your body. These include the C-peptide blood test and the diabetes antibody panel. A C-peptide test indicates how much endogenous, self-produced insulin your beta cells are capable of making in order to control your blood glucose. The C-peptide test is so important it can determine the entire course of your diabetes treatment and allow you to understand whether lifestyle change is enough to fully transform your diabetes health, or whether it's necessary to use oral medication or insulin to help control your blood glucose in addition to lifestyle change. Researchers believe it to be the most suitable measurement for assessing your endogenous insulin secretion. The range of fasting C-peptide varies between labs, but the reference range is usually between 0.8 and 4.0 nanograms per milliliter. If your fasting C-peptide value exceeds 4.0, it can indicate that the beta cells in your pancreas are working in overdrive to secrete excess insulin in response to a high degree of insulin resistance, and that increasing your insulin sensitivity can prevent against beta cell burnout. A fasting C-peptide value of between 3.0 and 4.0 nanograms per milliliter indicates that your beta cells are capable of manufacturing sufficient insulin and that it's possible to completely reverse insulin resistance and eliminate your need for diabetes medications by maximizing your insulin sensitivity. A fasting C-peptide value of between 1.5 and 3.0 nanograms per milliliter indicates that you likely have adequate insulin production to fully reverse prediabetes or type 2 diabetes, but that it's imperative to maximize your insulin sensitivity in order to prevent beta cells from becoming exhausted over time. A fasting C-peptide value of less than 1.5 nanograms per milliliter means that your beta cells have been significantly impaired. We have found that most people in this category eventually require insulin to control their blood glucose. The second blood test that provides useful information about the type of diabetes you are living with is called a diabetes antibody panel. This series of tests will help you determine whether you are living with an autoimmune form of diabetes, type 1 or type 1.5, or a lifestyle-related form of diabetes, type 2 diabetes, prediabetes, or gestational diabetes. The diabetes antibody panel measures whether your immune system is actively manufacturing proteins called antibodies, also called autoantibodies, that target beta cells for destruction or that target insulin itself. The type 1 diabetes generally occurs in individuals younger than 30 years of age who test positive for one or more antibodies and have a fasting C-peptide of 0.2 nanomole per liter or less. The majority of people diagnosed with type 1 diabetes experience a state called diabetic ketoacidosis, DKA, characterized by extremely high blood glucose values greater than 300 milligrams per deciliter, excessive thirst, unexplained weight loss, frequent urination, muscle cramping, and low energy. Type 1.5 diabetes, also known as latent autoimmune diabetes in adults, LADA, generally occurs in individuals older than 30 years of age who test positive for only one antibody and have a fasting C-peptide above 0.2 nanomole per liter. Even though this classification is less known, researchers believe that type 1.5 diabetes affects more people than type 1 diabetes around the world. Think of LADA as an adult-onset, slow-progressing version of type 1 diabetes, in which your pancreas is still capable of manufacturing and secreting insulin, but the presence of one antibody, in most cases, leads to a slow decline in insulin production. While it's true that people living with insulin-dependent diabetes generally benefit from watching their blood glucose on an hour-by-hour basis, people living with non-insulin-dependent diabetes can take a more relaxed, bird's-eye view approach. Regardless of the type of diabetes you are living with, monitoring your overall blood glucose patterns is a powerful practice that will help you relax the need to micromanage your readings 24 hours a day. When people first start observing lower blood glucose values, they often begin adjusting their mealtime carbohydrate to insulin ratios without first reducing their basal insulin. Our approach is different. We suggest making changes to your basal insulin strategy within the first few weeks of the program, in addition to changing your bolus insulin strategy. The reason we were so detail-oriented at the beginning of the process was because the mere act of documenting diabetes decisions significantly improved our chances of learning from our experiences. In fact, we took notes for years, scribbling down every last detail that could help piece together a complex picture with many moving parts. And what we both found, independently of each other, is that the more we wrote, the more we learned, and the more we learned, the less we needed to write. Every day, make new entries for each of the following activities: blood glucose measurements, consumption of a meal or snack, oral medication or other injectable medications, basal insulin injections, bolus insulin injections, feelings of hunger or satiety, exercise. For those living with insulin-dependent diabetes, decision trees will help you become confident in your insulin dosing strategy and will enable you to make real-time adjustments smoothly and predictably. For those living with non-insulin dependent diabetes, decision trees will help you become less reliant on pharmaceutical medication, teach you how to predictably reduce your A1C to a non-diabetic level of 5.6% or below, and maximize your chances of fully reversing insulin resistance. The glucose from carbohydrate-rich foods can enter your blood quickly, so it's important that insulin is already in your blood and ready to act at the time you begin eating. This is particularly important to know because rapid-acting insulin does not work immediately after it is injected. Rapid-acting insulins usually take between 15 and 60 minutes to begin working, and the more insulin resistant you are, the longer it will take for insulin to begin lowering your blood glucose. Eating immediately after injecting insulin can be problematic, So do your best to ensure that your blood glucose is less than 120 milligrams per deciliter and trending down before digging into your meal. Continuous glucose monitor, CGM, data is delayed by approximately 15 minutes. If you waited until your CGM read 120 milligrams per deciliter and trending down, you may be on your way to a low blood glucose value. Oftentimes, the side effects of pharmaceutical medications are more severe than the condition they're attempting to control, which makes the cost-benefit analysis not work in your favor. What's worse is that doctors who treat chronic diseases rely heavily upon pharmaceutical medications instead of on lifestyle change. Bolus insulin, also known as rapid-acting or short-acting insulin, is designed to be injected before you eat food in order to control the blood glucose elevation that occurs after your meal. Depending on the exact brand name, bolus insulin begins working in your blood within 10 to 60 minutes after you inject, and directly interacts with all tissues in your body to help transport glucose out of your blood. Bolus insulin is extremely effective at reducing your blood glucose and is considerably more powerful than basal insulin. Basal insulin is also called background insulin or long-acting insulin. Basal insulin can be delivered via a drip feed with an insulin pump or injected once or twice per day via a syringe or pen. Injections of basal insulin are designed to act over a period of 16 to 24 hours. Beta cells continually secrete small amounts of insulin in order to keep your blood glucose controlled at all times, and basal insulin is designed to mimic this action. Basal insulin is required only in patients with a low C-peptide level. A non-diabetic kidney filters about 180 grams of glucose out of your blood per day, and some of that glucose is then reintroduced to your blood. Given that your kidneys are a simple way for glucose to exit your blood and enter the toilet, pharmaceutical companies found a way to prevent your kidneys from reintroducing glucose back into your blood once it has been pulled out. SGLT2 inhibitors do just that. They alter the way your kidney functions so that it becomes very good at wasting glucose into the toilet, allowing the amount of glucose in your blood to drop 24 hours a day. While this may seem logical at first, the list of side effects is daunting, affecting your bladder, your genitalia, your bones, your cholesterol, and your blood pressure. Most important, SGLT2 inhibitors have been associated with kidney damage. Even though they are effective at reducing your blood glucose, they cause extensive tissue damage. In your liver, metformin reduces liver glucose export. In your intestine, metformin reduces glucose absorption, and in your muscle, metformin increases glucose uptake. The net effect is that metformin can lower your A1C value by as much as 1.0 to 1.5% when used in isolation without causing weight gain. One of the most interesting aspects of metformin use is that research indicates that it may actually reduce your risk for cardiovascular disease, especially in obese patients. For this reason, metformin is considered the safest and most effective first line of treatment. For the best and safest results, we recommend that you and your doctor take a proactive approach to reducing your oral medication use because as your insulin sensitivity increases, you are likely to find that you quickly need fewer medications. Over-medicating yourself can lead to life-threatening hypoglycemia, so it is actually safer to keep your blood glucose slightly elevated than it is to become frequently hypoglycemic. Pharmaceutical medications are not designed to treat the underlying cause of diabetes, heart disease, and many other chronic conditions. They are designed to help you manage the symptoms rather than reverse the underlying cause. For these reasons, we strongly encourage you to exhaust every lifestyle change option you have available before making the decision to use pharmaceutical medications, including a nutrient-dense, low-fat, plant-based whole food diet, various medicinal plants, a daily exercise regimen, periodic intermittent fasting, and frequent decision trees. Starting strong. Breakfast. You've probably heard that breakfast is the most important meal of the day. The truth is that each meal is important for different reasons. But breakfast is the first meal of the day, which makes it very important for establishing excellent blood glucose control in preparation for the rest of the day. Carbohydrate-rich whole foods require large amounts of insulin only if the total amount of fat in your diet is high, and especially if the amount of saturated fat in your diet is high. Remember, when you eat fat-rich foods, your ability to metabolize carbohydrate-rich foods declines immediately. Eating a low-fat, fruit-centric meal first thing in the morning substitutes for fat-rich and protein-rich foods. It's the presence of a vast array of behind-the-scenes micronutrients that increases the nutrient density of your fruit-centric meal and helps protect your blood glucose from rising rapidly. Sweeteners like table sugar, high fructose corn syrup, and agave nectar, on the other hand, are much more likely to spike your blood glucose because they have been processed into potent concentrated sweeteners and are devoid of protective nutrients, including vitamins, minerals, fiber, water, antioxidants, and phytochemicals. When you eat foods containing these added and refined sugars, your blood glucose may spike because the glucose inside is unprotected by fiber and other valuable micronutrients. The Glycemic Index, GI, measures how quickly a food raises your blood glucose level. The food with the highest GI is pure glucose at 100. Foods can be listed as low glycemic, 55 or less, medium glycemic, 56 to 69, or high glycemic, 70 to 100. The glycemic index of a given food varies by temperature at which the food is eaten, the cooking method, the ripeness, and the variety, for example, sweet potato versus white potato. The GI can also be misleading because it does not factor in the nutrient density of a given food. For example, a Snickers bar has a GI of 43 and peanut butter has a GI of 33, both of which are low. But as you now know, both will increase your level of baseline insulin resistance and result in elevated post-meal blood glucose the next time you attempt to eat carbohydrate-rich foods. As you gain insulin sensitivity, both the glycemic index and the glycemic load become somewhat irrelevant. Eat green light foods including greens, non-starchy vegetables, and legumes because they are rich in whole carbohydrate energy and have a high nutrient density, and refrain from choosing foods based on their glycemic index or glycemic load. The process of molecular mimicry is a sneaky tactic that bacteria and viruses use to avoid being detected by the human immune system. When you develop a leaky gut containing thousands of microscopic holes in your gut epithelium, undigested food proteins can trigger your immune system to mistakenly target similar proteins on human cells. In some individuals, the gliadin fraction of gluten triggers an autoimmune reaction that can result in the destruction of insulin-producing beta cells in your pancreas. Your gut epithelium is designed to absorb chains of amino acids that are either 1, 2, or 3 units long. In people who have a sensitivity to gluten, the gliadin fraction of the gluten protein can irritate these cells, resulting in the breakage of tight junctions. When this happens, large protein fragments can enter your blood, triggering an immune response. We have found that people living with diabetes have a difficult time drinking smoothies because they often experience a rapid rise in their blood glucose in the 1 to 3 hours following the meal. We recommend drinking smoothies in moderation, adding greens before blending, or eating fresh greens in addition to your smoothie. Because fruits are processed by your digestive system quickly, you may feel hungry after a few hours, and that's okay. Increase the size of your breakfast bowl or eat a second breakfast in the middle of the morning. Usually increasing the size of your bowl by adding more fruits, beans, peas, lentils, or intact whole grains solves the problem quickly. Many people who adopt a plant-based diet are often quite hungry as they adjust to eating larger volumes of food with lower calorie density. Feel free to eat green light foods generously in order to feel full throughout the day. Some people choose to eat fresh whole fruit every 2 to 3 hours or just snack on whole fruit when they feel hungry between meals. Enjoy as much as you like to stay satisfied. Gaining momentum. Lunch. When you eat the perfect lunch, we hope you will experience the following. 1. You will feel energized and remain satisfied for a minimum of 3 to 4 hours. 2. You will remain alert, focused, and full of energy throughout the afternoon, and you don't experience a post-lunch food coma. 3. You will feel more energized in the middle of the day. When assembling your lunch, we recommend you freely eat green light foods containing 700 calories per pound or less. Eat yellow light foods sparingly and minimize or completely eliminate red light foods. Through our own experience and our experience with clients, the experience of our colleagues, and research into the healthiest long-lived populations in the world, we know that long-term success on a low-fat, plant-based whole food diet is dependent on building meals around calorie-dense whole plant foods. When it comes to maximizing your insulin sensitivity, even small quantities of red light foods have a drastic negative impact on your blood glucose values and medication needs. Eating the majority of your food from the green light category maximizes your chances of losing weight and reversing insulin resistance simultaneously. Research has shown that most people eat approximately the same weight of food on a daily basis, with very small day-to-day variations. Studies have shown that people eat about 3 to 5 pounds of food per day, regardless of whether it contains foods with a low, medium, or high calorie density. Therefore, if you strategically eat green light foods with a low calorie density, by the time you're full, you will have eaten substantially fewer total calories than if you ate foods in the yellow or lead right categories. If instead you're trying to maintain your current body weight or gain weight, eat the majority of your diet from the most calorie-dense foods in the green light category, including sweet fruits, starchy vegetables, legumes, and intact whole grains. The human digestive system is incredibly complex and is in constant communication with your brain to control your appetite, as well as how quickly food moves through your stomach, your small intestine, and your large intestine. Your digestive system is intricately designed with a sophisticated collection of nerves that sense carbohydrates, fats, protein, nutrients, salt, changes in pH, and the amount of mechanical stretch at various locations. When you eat food, these neurons are in constant communication with your brain to make minute-by-minute decisions about when to start eating, when to slow down, and when to stop eating altogether. Nerves in your stomach and small intestine secrete serotonin, which not only makes you feel happy, but also propels partially digested food through your small intestine and tells your stomach to wait before releasing more food downstream. One of the most important components in your food that tells your brain when to slow or completely shut off your hunger signal is known as bulk. Bulk is a term given to the combination of water and fiber, which occupies space in your digestive system and mechanically stretches your stomach, your small intestine, and your large intestine. Scientists believe that because bulk is the most effective satiety signal, the amount of bulk in your food is the most important determinant of how satisfied you feel after a meal. When you eat fiber-rich foods, bacteria in your microbiome ferment it into short-chain fatty acids. Not only do these short-chain fatty acids boost your immune function, fight infections, improve insulin signaling, and promote insulin sensitivity, they also communicate with your brain to control how much food you eat. For best results, choose a few calorie-dense green light ingredients as the foundation of your lunch. Then add a few less calorie-dense non-starchy vegetables for flavor and texture. Excellent choices for calorie-dense foods at lunch include fruits, plantains, bananas, persimmons, figs, papaya, or mangoes. Starchy vegetables, potatoes, sweet potatoes, butternut squash, yams, or corn. Legumes, any variety of beans, lentils, or peas. Intact whole grains, brown rice, quinoa, millet, amaranth, farro, or barley. Minimally processed pasta alternatives, pasta made with chickpeas, quinoa, black beans, mung beans, brown rice, or lentils. Learning how to batch prep food can save you a lot of time and frustration. Think of batch prepping as a way to simplify your life in the short term. Specifically, it's cooking large amounts of food in a short period of time, storing it in the fridge or freezer, and grabbing it on the go when you are looking for a mastering diabetes-friendly meal and don't have much time. The total amount of food in your shopping cart will likely increase dramatically. Remember, the calorie density of your food will decrease because you will be eating a larger amount of fiber and water-rich foods. Luckily, fruits, vegetables, legumes, and intact whole grains are considerably less expensive than animal-based foods, so purchasing more of them may not increase the amount of money you spend. In fact, your bill may even go down. As a general rule of thumb, when you have eyeballed your cart and believe that you have purchased enough fruits and vegetables, add about 50% more. Choosing organic produce is almost always preferable, mainly because these plants have been grown using fewer chemicals, which translates to better health for you. One excellent online resource that we recommend consulting is the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15 by the Environmental Working Group. Every year, the Environmental Working Group does a comprehensive analysis of all fruits and vegetables in the United States to determine which foods have the highest and lowest pesticide residue. The Dirty Dozen is a list of 12 of the most contaminated fruits and vegetables, and the Clean 15 is a list of the 15 least contaminated fruits and vegetables. Developing a routine. Dinner. In the typical Western diet, dinner is usually the largest meal of the day, containing high-calorie, protein, and fat-rich foods like chicken, steak, fish, lamb, pork, and cheese. We, on the other hand, recommend eating lighter meals at the end of the day, especially if you are more sedentary in the evening hours, because you're preparing your body for sleep and have significantly lower energy requirements than in the beginning and middle of the day. You can still enjoy a large meal at dinner, but compared with your lunch, we recommend eating larger quantities of leafy greens and non-starchy vegetables instead of protein and fat-rich foods. After a day spent working or studying, most people experience decision fatigue, a mental and emotional state in which making decisions is incredibly challenging. Decision fatigue is an extremely common psychological state that often surfaces at the end of the day when your brain is fatigued from having made a wide array of decisions. Because decision fatigue can affect your food choices, do your best to think about your dinner in advance of the evening hours. We recommend preparing either the majority of your dinner or your entire dinner before you return home from work or school to minimize the amount of mental energy you have to expend in the evening hours. One of the most effective ways to socialize at a restaurant with family, friends, or coworkers and maintain your insulin sensitivity is to eat a meal before leaving your house. By enjoying a calorie-dense meal before you arrive at a restaurant or cafe, you'll be less preoccupied with what's on the menu because you won't be as hungry. The two keys to your success at any restaurant or cafe are planning and communication. When choosing what to order, focus less on the prepared dishes and more on the ingredients available on the menu. By doing this, you can pick and choose various ingredients, then ask the waitstaff for a custom dish containing those ingredients. Look for options like potatoes, squash, corn, beans, lentils, quinoa, brown rice, oatmeal, or fruits, and then order side dishes containing leafy greens and non-starchy vegetables with herbs and spices. What we've found over the years is that the most effective way to communicate your desires in an unthreatening and polite way is to intercept your server away from the table and explain why you have special requests. When you explain that you are living with diabetes and following a new diabetes protocol, you're increasing the likelihood that the server won't take your choices personally or as a knock against the food served at the restaurant. Most servers can relate to your efforts to improve your health and are likely to help you to the best of their ability. When you eat differently from others in social situations, you may begin to receive many questions about your food choices. These scenarios often begin when someone is genuinely curious about your habits, but it can sometimes turn into an uncomfortable interrogation session. Often these conversations can become intense, and without any preparation you may feel the need to defend your choices rather than talk about your new lifestyle from a place of curiosity and excitement. Keep in mind that you're not obligated to answer anyone's questions, especially if they feel judgmental or threatening. Feel free to emphasize that you are trying something new as an experiment. Intermittent fasting for increased insulin sensitivity and weight loss. For over 2 million years, our human ancestors were largely hunter-gatherers. They spent the bulk of their time gathering low-calorie foods, including wild grains, roots, and berries, and enjoyed the occasional high-calorie feast following a successful hunt. In truth, our human ancestors were actually gatherer-hunters, given that they spent the majority of their time gathering and a minority of their time hunting. In order to survive long periods of limited food availability, our human ancestors often fasted for extended periods of time, sometimes up to 10 days in a row. This pattern of fasting and feasting, cycling between periods of high and low calorie intake, created a series of biochemical adaptations that naturally selected for those who could survive an uncertain food supply. In almost every organism studied to date, including yeast, worms, flies, mice, rats, and most recently monkeys, calorie restriction has been shown to increase longevity and prolong or delay the onset of many age-related diseases. When you perform an intermittent fast, it provides you with an opportunity to enter negative calorie balance, a state in which your energy expenditure exceeds your energy needs. Operating in negative calorie balance for extended periods of time forces your muscles and liver to burn or offload stored glucose and fatty acids, which in turn makes them more responsive to these fuels the next time they become available. Because performing longevity experiments in humans presents ethical problems, it is difficult to know for certain whether inducing negative calorie balance in humans will extend lifespan. However, similar to animal studies, human experiments have demonstrated that calorie restriction delays the onset of many age-related diseases, which suggests that it is extremely likely that negative calorie balance increases longevity in humans. There are many reasons that calorie restriction is very powerful at reducing cancer incidence resulting from reduced body weight, reduced inflammatory cytokines, reduced growth factors, reduced oxidative stress, improved DNA repair processes, and reduced cell replication rates. Continuous calorie restriction can place physical, emotional, and mental limitations on your daily life, as well as become quite limiting in the long term. To solve this problem, many research groups have developed lifestyle-friendly intermittent fasting strategies to mimic the metabolic effects of calorie restriction. There are endless permutations of intermittent fasting regimens. In our own experience and in that of our clients, the two most achievable and sustainable intermittent fasting regimens are the once per week 24-hour intermittent fast and the 16/8 daily intermittent fast. The main reason why it is difficult to perform a true 24-hour intermittent fast for some people is that consuming 0 calories for an extended period of time can deprive your brain of glucose if the amount of glycogen stored in your liver is small, which can result in rapid mood swings, frustration, anger, inability to concentrate, shaky hands, sweating on the palms of your hands or forehead, and slurred speech. The second intermittent fasting option that is both effective and oftentimes less challenging than performing a 24-hour intermittent fast is the 16/8 daily intermittent fast. Many people find this option to be more achievable because it requires eliminating one meal per day, either breakfast or dinner. Whether you choose to skip your breakfast or your dinner, on a daily basis you have an 8-hour window of opportunity in which to eat 2 or 3 meals. It is often challenging to eat a day's worth of food in this 8-hour window, so resist the temptation to stuff yourself knowing that you'll be fasting for the next 16 hours, and instead finish your meals feeling full and comfortable. By doing so, you will likely accelerate the rate at which you lose weight, given that you reduce your calorie intake in this 24-hour period. If you are hoping to gain weight in order to arrive at your ideal body weight, performing intermittent fasting will likely make it quite challenging. We recommend not performing intermittent fasting until you achieve your ideal body weight, at which point you can perform either a once per week 24-hour intermittent fast or a 16/8 daily intermittent fast and prevent against any further weight loss. The way to do this is to eat enough calories during your feeding window to prevent against an overall reduction in total calories. There is no denying the fact that humans are emotional creatures and that it's common to eat in response to emotions. In the world of abundance in which we live, Eating is a natural response to both favorable and unfavorable situations. But this direct connection between your emotional state and your food intake can often result in the overconsumption of calories. Experiencing true hunger is something that you are likely to experience by performing a single intermittent fast. We have discovered that people eat in response to two types of hunger and often have a difficult time differentiating between the two. Physiological hunger is the type of hunger you experience when your brain, muscles, and internal organs are in a true low-energy state. This is the type of hunger that you experience following a demanding workout or when you have exerted significant physical or mental energy and need high-quality fuel to replenish your energy needs. This is a type of hunger that you can feel not only in your stomach, but also in your muscles and in your brain. Emotional hunger, on the other hand, is the type of hunger you experience when a situation or thought process creates a desire to eat. As opposed to physiological hunger, emotional hunger creates a feeling of true hunger even though the biological requirement for fuel is low or non-existent. Exercising for maximum insulin sensitivity. Because daily movement is such a powerful insulin sensitizer, we can all but guarantee that following these recommendations will further reduce your need for oral medication and insulin, reduce your fasting and post-meal blood glucose, reduce your total cholesterol, reduce your LDL cholesterol, increase your HDL cholesterol, and improve the condition of blood vessels and tissues all over your body. Mitochondria live in every cell of your body except for red blood cells, and they are the place where glucose, fatty acids, and amino acids get burned for energy. The number of mitochondria inside of a cell varies by type. Skeletal muscle cells, heart muscle cells, skin cells, liver cells, sperm cells, neurons, and insulin-producing beta cells each contain a different mitochondrial density. Each cell can contain as few as 100 and as many as 5,000 copies of mitochondria. Inside each mitochondria, glucose, fatty acids, and amino acids are stripped of their energy-containing parts to produce a high-energy compound known as ATP, which is then used to power thousands of reactions inside the cell, including complex processes like protein synthesis, nutrient absorption, cell replication, and cell death. In non-obese people, muscle makes up between 40 and 50% of total body mass, and each muscle cell contains thousands of mitochondria. Muscle mitochondria are mainly responsible for generating ATP to control how nutrients get in and out of the cells and to contract and elongate muscle fibers when you exercise. When you engage in physical activity, mitochondria can increase the rate of ATP production by as much as 100 times. Making lifestyle changes that significantly improve mitochondrial function can dramatically increase your level of insulin sensitivity. Likewise, increasing your insulin sensitivity using your diet and exercise can indirectly improve mitochondrial function. Exercise is the single most effective way to make more mitochondria in muscle tissue. When you challenge your muscle to contract frequently, such as when you move your body during exercise, muscle fibers respond by increasing the number of mitochondria so that they can burn more fuel and process more oxygen the next time they are required to perform work. This results in improved endurance, increased strength, and an increased ability to perform work. When excess fatty acids accumulate inside muscle and liver cells from eating a high-fat diet, extensive scientific research has shown that mitochondria actually increase free radical production. The most powerful aspect of performing regular exercise when living with diabetes is that it acts as a substitute for insulin. Regardless of whether or not you inject insulin, performing daily exercise can significantly reduce the amount of insulin necessary to control your blood glucose. When you contract and elongate your muscles hundreds or thousands of times during exercise, you force them to deplete the fuel in their internal storage tanks, including glycogen and triglycerides, the storage form of fatty acids. The type, duration, and intensity with which you exercise all have dramatic effects on how much glucose and how many fatty acids are burned for energy at any given moment in time. All forms of exercise burn both glucose and fatty acids simultaneously, and your muscles always oxidize multiple fuels at the same time. Glucose is preferentially burned for energy during short-duration, high-intensity bursts of energy, whereas fatty acids are preferentially burned for energy during longer-duration, lower-intensity exercise. To get maximum benefit from your time spent exercising, make sure that you're moving fast enough, that you are unable to hold a conversation with someone, and are unable to sing your favorite song. But contrary to popular belief, you don't have to exercise at high intensity to become more insulin sensitive. Cardiovascular exercise is the most powerful insulin sensitizer and can reduce your blood glucose within 15 to 30 minutes of continuous movement. This effect can last for approximately 24 to 48 hours following your exercise session. Cardiovascular exercise includes movements that elevate your heart rate and can be maintained for extended periods of time without stopping. Resistance exercise is a less powerful insulin sensitizer, but it has longer-lasting effects, reducing your body's need for insulin for approximately 24 to 72 hours following your exercise session. Combining cardiovascular movements and resistance movements together is the most powerful insulin sensitizer because it improves the ability of glucose and insulin to move in and out of your blood vessels and allows repairing muscle tissue to uptake large amounts of glucose. In general, your blood glucose is likely to decline during exercise, and because of that, we recommend elevating your glucose prior to getting moving. If you are living with insulin-dependent diabetes, elevating your blood glucose before you begin exercising is a simple way to protect against unwanted hypoglycemia. To begin, we suggest an ideal pre-workout blood glucose range between 150 and 160 milligrams per deciliter, which you can adjust as you become more familiar with how your blood glucose changes during exercise. If you're worried that elevating your blood glucose before you exercise will increase your risk of developing diabetes complications, understand that the benefits your brain, heart, blood vessels, muscles, and digestive organs receive far outweigh the risks associated with temporarily elevated blood glucose. Your muscle can store between 1,200 and 2,000 calories of glucose as glycogen, an easily accessible and quick-burning form of storage that contains glucose. When your muscles use glycogen as fuel, single glucose units are taken away on an on-demand basis. Once a glucose molecule is released from the glycogen granule, it undergoes a series of chemical reactions, ultimately gaining access to the mitochondria so that it can be burned completely for ATP. The amount of glycogen you store in your muscles is a direct result of both your diet and your exercise patterns. Eating a diet high in whole carbohydrate-rich foods and low in both fat and protein allows you to carbo-load with every meal, providing your muscles with the impetus to regularly increase their glycogen stores. This in turn will give you the feeling of more energy during the day and during exercise. Not only does eating frequent meals high in whole carbohydrate energy increase the size of your glycogen stores, frequent meals low in carbohydrate energy also shrink your glycogen stores over time and cause your muscles to break down more protein during exercise. In general, the higher your intensity level during exercise, the more likely it will be that you experience a high blood glucose during or after exercise. The reason for this is quite simple. Exercise that requires maximum effort stimulates your adrenal gland to produce the stress hormones cortisol and adrenaline, both of which signal your liver to dump glucose into your blood quickly. Think of cortisol and adrenaline as fast-acting and extremely powerful chemical signals that make sure your blood glucose stays high enough to perform movement at high intensity. Unlike insulin, however, exercise shuttles glucose and fatty acids into tissues not only during your exercise session, but for many hours afterward, resulting in an afterburn that can last for 24 to 72 hours, depending on the duration and intensity of your exercise session. In the immediate few hours after you exercise, muscles enter the phase 1 afterburn, in which they are at their most insulin-sensitive state. In phase 1, your muscles can absorb glucose from your blood either without the use of insulin or using only small amounts of insulin. In effect, your muscles are so hungry for glucose that they modify the action of some biochemical pathways to allow glucose to enter the cells of the tissue using very small amounts of insulin. Your insulin sensitivity begins decreasing the moment you stop exercising, but eating a low-fat plant-based whole food diet increases your baseline and peak insulin sensitivity. Performing frequent, long-duration or high-intensity exercise is less powerful at improving your insulin sensitivity than eating a low-fat plant-based whole food diet. Those in the low-calorie, low-protein group eating a 100% plant-based diet had lower total cholesterol, lower LDL cholesterol, lower triglycerides, and lower blood pressure than highly competitive endurance runners who ran an average of 2,500 miles per year for 21 years. The plant-based eaters were not exercising regularly, but they had measurably better cardiometabolic health than the endurance runners, despite the fact that the runners were 5% leaner. Meal plans and recipes. We believe that it is crucial for you to fall in love with the food you eat in order to create a lifestyle that is enjoyable for years to come. We want you to look forward to each and every meal the way we do. As you're well aware by now, the recipes in this book are low in fat and they're also salt-free. High salt equals increased appetite, equals weight gain, equals increased risk for type 2 diabetes. As you begin to reduce or eliminate heavily salted, high-fat processed foods from your diet and increase the amount of nutrient-dense green light plants, your taste buds will begin to transform in ways that you can't predict right now. As your taste buds change, simple whole plant foods will begin to have more flavor and complexity, and before you know it, you're likely to begin craving them. The primary cooking methods called for in the Mastering Diabetes method are sautéing, stir-frying, steaming, boiling, roasting, and baking, all without using oil. As you know, oils are a red light food that we recommend avoiding. We especially like cooking with liquid because it reduces the formation of the aforementioned AGE compounds. AGEs are formed when you cook at high temperatures and low moisture environments, that is, sautéing, stir-frying, and roasting. And they promote atherosclerosis, neuropathy, inflammation, endothelial damage, and kidney disease. While there are countless gadgets that you could purchase to simplify the process of preparing food, and you are welcome to buy them, we'd rather you started with the basics. A sharp knife, an inexpensive blender and/or immersion blender, and a mixing bowl or two will get the job done. You may not want to go all the way and follow this method to a T, and that's okay. Just know that if you are not getting the results you are looking for, then it may be time to reevaluate your commitment to the 4 components of the Mastering Diabetes method: low-fat plant-based whole food nutrition, periodic intermittent fasting, daily movement, and completing decision trees. If you are feeling hungry between meals, make sure to focus on eating more calorie-dense green light foods at the beginning of your meal. This will help ensure that you don't fill up on low-calorie items, then get hungry 1 or 2 hours after your meal. And with that, I end this reading.